2023, and this is a public meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, full committee meeting. Let's get started with introductions just from our PCCEP members tonight. And well, I guess I can start. I'm Dory Gravinsky, PCCEP project manager, and I'll just go to my right to start with our first PCCEP member and then pass it along.
Thanks, Dory. Ashley Schofield, I use she, her pronouns, PCCEP member and co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee.
Hey, I'm Odelia Zuckerman, she, her pronouns, and I'm a new PCCEP member.
Hi, I'm Carrie Driver, also she, her pronouns, and also a new PCCEP member.
Byron, excuse me, Byron, a PCCEP member and Settlement Policy Subcommittee member.
Hi, Kip Silverman. Sorry, I'm trying to get the carrots chewed up. Kip Silverman, he, him pronouns, and a relatively new PCCEP member as well.
Leslie Martinez, she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of the Community Engagement as well as the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee.
Nathan Castle, he, him pronouns, and member of the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee.
And I'm
Uh-oh.
My name is Tia Palafox. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee.
All right. And we also have our facilitator for the night.
Hello, my name is Afrida Davis, pronouns she, her, and facilitator.
And that mic should be working back there. You guys can use that there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Tia, do you want to read our community engagement or community agreements?
Listen actively and respectfully, share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, call out bias, be okay with ambiguity.
Thanks, Tia. So I'll just run through this. We're going to start with a debrief on the PCCEP co-chairs meeting with the mayor and Chief Day that happened last Friday. Then we'll spend the rest of the meeting kind of reflecting on 2023 for PCCEP, lessons learned, things we want to move forward with, and then kind of move into what's next for 2024, and kind of maybe mapping out some ideas that we already have, what things could look like as we get started with all of that. And we will have an open public comment period as always. Okay, where is Pastor Wisner? Okay, well, both of our co-chairs are currently not in the room, so
Pastor Weisner's here.
reflect on what really worked about what you all did this year and what where you want to grow as a group in the upcoming year. So.
Frida, were you gonna turn them in at the end?
No, you're gonna hold on to them and then we're gonna pair up after that and you're gonna share in pairs. Anybody else need?
Yeah, let's just pass it
There we
around,
go.
maybe.
And then the pins can move around that way. Excellent.
Okay, perfect.
That's what you're.
Did you put the instructions? I did not. So we're gonna take a moment to just write personally what we think was successful, like some highlights from the year, decent, and what we think we need to improve on, and then we'll pair up and share. Maybe was there anything that like attracted you to PCCEP?
Yeah, that's.
We're gonna take about 30 more seconds.
Yeah, one's what?
All right, and so I'd love for you to pair up. So turn to a partner and kind of share only what went well for you this year. So for our newer members, please try to pair up with someone who's been here so they can get insight on it because you can't really talk about how great of a year it was. But yeah, and then I think pair, and then like a 3 here. There we go.
Hi. Okay.
Yeah, I think there.
So, I mean, I can start since I've been here.
Yeah.
I think what went well was we kind of got in a group towards the end of like, towards the end of the year. So like Ashley, Nathan, and myself both new to we were only 1 year compared to everybody else. So I think that there was a really strong like support structure that allowed us to like jump into projects right away. So I think that was something that went well. It sounds like that's very intentionally driven by the staff. So I think there was a lot of resources to help us get onboarded, especially for people that have been coming in like brand new. And
Okay.
we also had some good community engagement with our town halls. They were successful and they led to good presentations. So yeah,
I
I
mean,
would say
that's,
those
I
are the
don't
things that
know
went well.
past, but
Cool.
just in my short
about
time here, what I thought was really
Well,
awesome was
the
that you
first
stand up to the
meeting that I attended, I saw the notices and I really didn't know what it was, but it was suggested when, with the meeting with the mayor and Gonzalez over PSR. It's the first one I attended.
In
And,
this review.
no, I was remote.
Oh, but it was the one that happened.
I think it happened here. And the engagement of it and then reading more about the committee, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to sign up for this. So the level of engagement and was compelling. So and we got some good stuff done this year.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I did not know until, I think, previous meeting, 2 meetings ago, that the recommendations to abandon the gunshot detection, a lot of it stemmed from this, which is awesome. So yeah, really cool stuff. Stuff I'd like to see though, and I don't know if we're supposed to talk about that yet. But I'd like to see a way to.
Yeah, I think we're not supposed to talk about that yet.
Okay, all right,
So let's hold on.
all right, I'll hold on to it.
Yeah,
But
because otherwise we're gonna run out of things to talk about next time.
that's like, I'm not in meetings all day long. I'm totally
too.
down for an early adjournment.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Mhm.
Okay,
So,
so you mean like the
yeah,
transparency?
very cool.
They're able to
So
tell us
from when you started to now,
Mhm.
are you seeing a different? I don't know, what's your opinion of the structure of the committee
So
and
you felt like that.
how it's
this
going?
year? Okay, that's
I
great.
think it's been evolving. Like Dory was also new at the time that we started.
Hmm.
So I think the way that we got onboarded was good. I think the way that you're getting onboarded is better. And I think it's just gonna keep getting better.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have some established procedures, because I think that was an issue before, that there weren't a lot of established procedures to make sure that everybody could engage right away.
Mhm. Okay,
So I'm looking forward to that.
cool. I thought our orientation was great.
Yeah.
What's the community stuff? That's great.
We're not looking to get you a badge. We're not trying to get you a badge.
Let's see. Oh, we've gone to get
Let's
together
take
first.
about 1 more minute of sharing with one another.
We understand.
I think the community gets along really well, gets things done, likes to collaborate, so I think that's another thing that's been going well.
Yeah, that was obviously good this year.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Well, yeah, that's, I mean, when I wrote down.
Right on,
that,
yeah, no, I appreciate your
I
response.
feel very proud of the way this group stands up for the role of community voice. I've seen us do it in many different ways and on occasions just in the last few weeks.
I mean, you can make a job out of what you want to do. You want to do the night, most of them are doing the day.
Yeah. No, it's hard. I tried to catch a few meetings and then I've had to watch some of them before the, like the one with the council that starting with measure 110 and they have to see the very good reports.
I want to see your orientation was in September.
Yeah, that sounds.
Time flies.
All right, let's go ahead and bring it back. Let's turn our attention to the screen up here. All right, so up here on the screen, we have the 3 recommendations that was passed this year. And I think that's one of the really great things, because that's one of the powers and the strengths of this group, is being able to have write recommendations and get them heard and comments and passed on them. And so up here on the screen, we have the 3 recommendations, and it'd be great if we can just go through each one, read them, and if a PCEP member who's been here and been a part of that process can talk a little bit about that specific recommendation, that would be great. After this, we're going to get into a bit more conversation about just our learnings around these recommendations and the process of it. So can I get a PCEP member who was here during the process to talk about the first recommendation? I love watching people read it.
I'll speak up since I was next to the mic here, but I'll pass it around too, of course. I think when I was talking to Adelia, I was about the wins. I think I was really thinking about the gunshot detection technology process and recommendation. That felt like a really good win in terms of just like us learning the process of how to engage community and how to make a decision. Like that was, I think we've used this as an example as we move forward. Independent monitor, I want to say, like, for me, from my perspective, I think I came in, I feel like that was some work that was being done by PCEP members before I started in August of last summer. So there was like some pieces already put together that got us. So when we got to that recommendation part, I think I had like really just relied on, other members to sort of fill in that like expert, that process and say like, yeah, we did what we needed to do to make a recommendation. And I think it was really definitely filled by community input. And so I got, we got to see that again. And I think by the time we got to the GDT recommendation, I think we had learned, we'd use that independent monitor learning and input to sort of inform how we were going to go about making recommendation for the GDT stuff. That was my thoughts.
Sorry, chewing. So I think we can maybe just shift into like thinking specifically about the process around those three, because sort of one of the goals that we have been thinking about this meeting was reflecting on that process specifically, because PCEP has stated that something that you'd like to engage with more next year is writing more recommendations and engaging more with that process. And so I think it's useful to think about what worked, things that you'd like to approach differently, strategies that you used this last year to kind of, go through the process, but also, that you use to make these things successful. And I think we could unpack that with each individual recommendation. I think they all worked a little bit differently, but I think there are themes throughout also that PCEP as a group kind of engaged. Yeah, any thoughts coming to mind?
I'm like Dory, I'm chewing. And that's why I didn't grab Mike earlier. But what worked in the areas of how our recommendations were really strong was the details of time that we spent in areas of understanding the subject, because we were easy to discuss not the assumption of everyone's injection, but went back to community and pulled out the essentials of what we was hearing. And in there, we were able to set a course directed toward whether it was the shot spotter or whether it was with the independent monitoring based upon what was there. And then also with this contact survey. And again, none of us came in as the experts, but the research and the community input was very important to help guide our decisions. And if I would make a recommendation out of the thought of how to do more, I believe that as we track information of where we have been in some form of written, and the reason I make this strong recommendation is because there was a group prior to us, and then there was a group prior to them. But in every recommendation and strength of it, if we are able to start putting it into a place of like a marker or a reference point of what is the areas of subjects that we're able to keep moving with the spirit, I believe there, people who come behind us are able to do the exact same thing in picking up and moving forward with other recommendations. That's my part.
Just open then.
Yeah, I think we can just use this guy. I think that's something that we also discussed when we had our retreat tracking, and that is something that I've had put on the back burner and I brought up, but I feel bad because I haven't moved it more forward. But I think that that is definitely a thing that we need to do, because one of the things that has prevented PCEP, in my opinion, from moving things forward is that when we get new members, it's almost like starting over from scratch. So having a way to keep that institutional knowledge, to keep recommendations like at the forefront, so that we, like, new members can just jump in and keep moving things forward, I think is going to be pretty critical. So I don't know if we're making commitments or whatever, but I can commit to the next full committee meeting to have a draft to share, because it is pretty far along. I already started it, of the tracker.
I feel like not everyone may be aware of this, but Leslie has actually been working on a pretty comprehensive tracker of all PCEP recommendations ever, which can you say a little bit more about what you've been tracking?
Yeah, definitely. So what I've been tracking so far, or the field so far, and it'll be open, bless you, to more input, is when the recommendation was made, how long it's been, like, as a counter, that when it, from the time that it's been made, and then when it gets approved, or whenever we get a response, we will also track that. It is a little bit of a big lift because I am having to go back and find all of these recommendations. And if you've ever looked at the PCEP like recommendations page, it's really just text. So I have to basically hand pull, or I mean, I guess, anyways, I have to hand pull and put them all in a spreadsheet. But going forward, what we can do as part of the recommendation process is just the next recommendation, put it in, and then track it. So that's the piece of going back in time is a little much, but yeah, we would be tracking when the recommendation gets submitted, when we get a response, and what the response is, as well as like how long it took to get a response.
Were you also looking into like the kind of tangible, like the result of
Mhm.
the, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that piece of it I think is, has never been researched, and that's really cool. Yeah, really, really amazing work that Leslie is doing, and so helpful.
Will this be just, I know we talked about it, but it feels like a really long
It
time ago,
does, yeah.
actually, like, oh, is it gonna be an internal, process, or can we share it?
That is a great question. So my hope is that we can actually publish it so that the community can keep track of things with us and keep
Yeah,
things accountable
totally.
as well. But that is a bigger discussion, because it's like, where's it going to be hosted and things like that. Because I think we talked about, like, the city website is very specific. So Dory's nodding. So yeah, that is definitely part of the plan, but it might take some time to get to there.
Awesome. And sorry, so one more question. Because maybe that could be part of the codification. I don't know, just thinking out loud a little bit, but, like, PCEP's like, oh, and that, like, this is a tool that we need or something. But my other question was, do you think that this process you're making, could it also include, or the system you're creating could also include, like, the community input part of that recommendation process? Like,
Interesting.
and I mean, that'd be maybe more internal,
Yeah.
but in that spirit of institutionalizing something and, like, keeping it
Mhm.
going, like, could we plug in, like, oh, this is when we had a community event around this topic that we're eventually moving into recommendations?
That might be a different aspect than this specific tracker. But I mean, I think those are things that, like, we can, because we're also working potentially on, like, a way. One of the things that I was going to put in, like, recommendations is, like, we've done a really great job of, like, meeting together and staying connected, but I think we could still be better about that and finding ways to, like, collaborate that work for everybody, because some of us are at different skill sets when it comes to, like, what we have access to and what we've been exposed to. So I think finding ways that engage people at all levels is really kind of that key to inclusion. So basically I'm trying to work on a SharePoint kind of site that we can all access, and that's another piece of things. But first things first, the tracker. And so those things that you're talking about, like keeping track of events, keeping track of things like that, that we've had outside of that website that we have on the city, that could be more where it lives.
Nathan, did you have a comment about the recommendation, lessons learned conversation?
Yeah, so I think, can you hear me on the microphone? How about now? So I think a pattern I saw of what worked really well this year, or I guess I have two comments. One comment is a really good pattern is preparing a draft recommendation text, getting most of the work done, and then inviting input and refining it from there. I think in the past where we've fallen down is where we try to create something from scratch or do significant drafting in a meeting together. And so where that connects into what we can do better, I think in the future is potentially think about proactively creating work groups to draft some of these recommendations for policy areas we care about, and not relying so much on the open meetings for the policy work we want to do. And when I say not relying on open meetings, it's not so much concealing anything, but just it's very hard to do drafts in a big meeting. The other thing I'll say is I think we did a really good job. A lot of the stuff we worked on was reactive to things in the community. And I think that was actually really effective responding to the gunshot detection and the independent monitor / partial termination stuff. But there's so many issues that are not so urgent that I think we still want to work on. And so again, I think it'd be really helpful to, maybe make a plan to have smaller work groups that tackle some of those issues.
Awesome feedback, Nathan. Thank you. Any other?
I wanted to tag on. I wanted to tag in on Leslie's track. A suggestion I would think, if possible, and I'm not sure, but in the final areas of tracking recommendation and implementation from the Bureau itself, those or wherever, that we kind of look at, hopefully, when it's falling out of policy, when things are not being followed out of where we actually don't have to keep revisiting from falling and recommendations falling. The reason I use that is because 203 is where we were with the PAC 03. And it was good that we had it documented. And when we look at now the things that we're seeing, we follow the same that is actually working toward what it is, the resolution of what we're having. So somewhere things are sometimes tracked, but then when it's a whole new city and a whole new group, we almost kind of revisit what was already said before. And I think I've always seen no new ideal, but it's just that we haven't seen a pattern when it was starting to derail from where we were at. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know that that this type of tracker would lend itself necessarily to that, but I think it would be an excellent tool to see what recommendations we've already put forth, and maybe like track, do we have other similar recommendations that we've put in the past, and like identify patterns. But I don't think that it could be, at least that in this version of things, unless we get some real big funding to like be able to track some things proactively, that it could get to that, but it could be adjacent, I guess is what I'm saying.
And the reason I use a lot of that, because the information can be taken back to a training, what we missed, what is not being taught more of. And you can use those thoughts of saying how that someone didn't get it in the areas of what they were learning. And that's how I think.
Yeah. I think once once I like present it on the next meeting, we can maybe talk about some opportunities for enhancement and like what we could see it looking like in the future.
Any thoughts from folks we haven't heard from yet? Recommendations, lessons learned, past year lessons learned?
Thanks. We had a great conversation about what felt like a productive, a lot of progress this year. Just in my few months, I was like, I'm really impressed with how PCEP stands up for the role of community in policing again and again, and what I've witnessed. And Byron was saying that that's been thanks to some leadership, if I speak your words, and also, you know, just some dedication to the progress or the process. I was, and when I talk to people about PCEP, something that I am aware I'm doing is piecing together information about different organizations and how they relate to PCEP. And I'm not the expert to do that, but I think we could come up with a great set of infographics or a resource map of some sort that would really help people understand how they can engage with us more.
That's a great suggestion, Carrie. Thank you so much. Leslie, did you have a response to that?
Just something a little bit, because I know that we've talked a little bit about like there's limits to what we can do on our city website, and we can't start a new website to host things like infographics or have it be more user friendly. Because I do agree with Carrie. There's things that like there's definitely things we could do to make the user experience of our website a little bit better, so that people that aren't engaging with policy on a day-to-day are welcome to it. I struggle a lot with things like the COCO report or like those big reports that are hundreds of pages long. And it's like, yeah, we get a presentation, but there's no other outside of that presentation. How else are people getting that information and are able to digest it? So how can we expect community to be engaged if they don't have different ways to engage with information in a way that makes sense to them? Because everybody learns differently, everybody has different, you know, there's like people like to read, people like to watch videos, like there's just different learning styles, and like how are we accommodating to engage the majority of our community?
Yeah, two things. So one thing comes to mind. As you know, we will be hiring an independent monitor. And I think there's a real opportunity there for PCEP to communicate with the monitor about what you would like to see done differently. PCEP has talked a lot about the accessibility of the COCO. And I just want to highlight for you all again that that process is changing, and you are, you know, an important fixture of how this is supposed to work for community. The other part of it, kind of the bigger like accessibility website stuff, I don't know what is allowed in terms of hosting other websites. That might be a good question for our city attorney. I don't know if she wants to comment on it. I think the question is it permissible for an entity like PCEP to create a website, put information on a website that isn't hosted by the city?
I would say I'm almost certainly that the city requires everybody to use their website. Hi, Sarah Ames, with the city attorney's office.
Her pronouns. Is it on?
Yeah, okay. I would say I haven't looked into the city regulations put out by the Bureau of Technology Services, but I'm quite certain that they require everybody to use their website. And I think there might be ways to make it more, there are different functionalities. I see different agencies using different kind of databases and having data presented differently, but generally, I don't think that city agencies can use non-city websites. And there's reasons for that. One is in terms of supporting agencies and having technology services able to support all agencies, equally and with some skill because they know what they're on. And another would be public records law and our duty to archive and have access to all city records. So those are two reasons just off the top of my head that I can see that why that would be a logical restriction.
I think we have asked before, and that's the answer we got, which is why it was the question too is like, if we can't do that, which I think it makes sense that we can't, what can we do with the existing website and how can we make it better?
I know that Kip is really interested in this area as well. And Nathan, you want to make a comment and then we can go to Kip?
Yeah, I just want to say I've seen some city websites that are more creative in how they use the platform. And so I think there probably are some opportunities with the existing technology we have to improve things. So I'd recommend looking around at some of the better city websites. I know I've seen some really cool sites from PBOT. I want to say IPR has or the auditor's office has a really good implementation. So there are probably some opportunities to be creative, and I don't know if they have like special tricks or anything, but that might be a background thing. And then the other thing I'd suggest is, and I don't know, I feel like we've talked about this at some point, but can we be using like Instagram and TikTok and things like that to reach out to people? I know the police bureau has actually been very successful in reaching out through those platforms and yeah.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, cool.
Very much so.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sitting back here. I'm fine, but my partner, who I haven't seen for 4 days, just tested positive for COVID, so I'm abundance of caution. So anyway, I do know, unless anything drastically has changed over the last few years, that some of the things we can do is get a city-sanctioned Instagram. You can even get a city-sanctioned Facebook, although I understand the kids don't use that these days. There should be a number of things that we can do with the website that we do have, and I'm super interested in attending, maybe with a couple other PCCEP members, the web training that BTS generally offers different bureaus. One more idea that I think would be really neat is that you can request a custom URL from BTS. So it would be a portland.gov, but it potentially could be a pcep.portland.gov. And that might make it easier for people to bookmark us and find us and stuff like that. So there should be a whole range of things that we can do within the legal requirements and what BTS can host for us. I'm super interested in working on that with anybody who's interested.
Great suggestions. That, by the way, that is our domain or our,
it is?
yeah, it is. But no, I think the point is well taken. I think there are probably some opportunities even within the city website parameters to improve accessibility. It's sort of it's an ongoing there's a lot to learn on there for sure. So yeah, this is a great discussion. I think lots of ideas here. And I am taking notes on all of this. Any other thoughts about just kind of this sort of general brainstorming that we're doing right now? Go for it. I'll hand it over to Ashley and then Pastor Wesner.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo there's what everybody else was saying. I think something that worked really well was that we sort of had this little bit of a process for getting community input and drafting letters. I think also starting the quarterly meetings with the mayor's office, I think has been a really good thing, and I think will help us, make those recommendations a little more real, a little more, tangible when we think about like what we want out of them. So I was just wondering if maybe we can think about in the spirit of like institutionalization and making sure that like new members feel like they can go and find information. And I apologize if this is already there. I don't think it is, but like, well, particularly I know it's not there, is that this like, and I was thinking like an infographic too of just like maybe like a one pager of like, if you have an idea as a PCEP member, you've heard from the community, you want to start something, here's kind of like a roadmap to do that. And it would be for like all of us, but I think that way we can empower like leadership in the committee. And so thinking of like, for instance, how things have happened are we have initial discussion, like a topic comes up, either we've exchanged emails or we've heard something from the public. And then and this is how I was explaining to you a little bit, like, I think some of our wins came from this like process of having a lot of meetings, but like, initial conversation, then moved it into community input. And then I think, Nathan, I think you talked about it, like we kind of finally figured out how to do the letter recommendation development part. Like I think we tried doing that, the creating it in the public space, and then that was just too much. Then we stopped and we went and made a drafted something, then brought it back to for input again. So I think like there's some like milestones that we could mark and really like even just draft out, put pen to paper so that that there's just some sort of living knowledge of like, this is this is the process that we're all saying works well, and it kind of keeps us honest and accountable. Then again, helps fold in new members, and really, helps us sort of like, well, have we done this part, or this idea, has been brought up a lot. We've already sort of done this initial conversation. Maybe is it ready to draft something, and then, or whatnot. So I'll stop talking, but I think we could write something out to make it, a little bit more like part of what we, this is how we get recommendations. It involves a lot of community input. It involves a lot of thoughts, involves a lot of meetings, but I think that worked really well with gunshot detection technology and contact survey. We've had these successes because we kind of already done a process. So maybe writing it down could be a good step for the new year.
I think that's a great idea too. Hello. Can you hear me yet? Can you hear me? I don't think they hear it. Testing, there we go. What went well, and I think that we can move into a greater improvement too. I think what went well with our group as well was having, and I do want to use this as a platform of acknowledgement to Dory's staff and team, as well as the city engaging. What went well was, I think, when we were able to bring the leadership from the Bureau and every area of technology of experts that was able to weed out the guesswork of what we were, directions and trying to put together in that. The one example is where that we had an officer in areas had groped and was not arrested for it. We're going through a legal process where that there was some criminal allegations made. And we actually were able to dig deeper into how the process for that type of allegations and discipline moves. What we learned in that was remarkable about how the process and the complaint and how it moves. So again, I think that what helps us and streams us is, again, moving the guesswork, and again, complementing how that we might be able to continue that relationship inside of those leaderships in the city that really have, I believe, not only because it's a requirement, but really wants to come and engage and help guide us in the directions of what makes us who we are as a thought for how I think I see one of the improvements of what we have came from and done throughout the year. And looking forward to seeing that this group is listening to what I'm hearing now. Place I might be able to stay home and watch the basketball game. And
I had a few things I was thinking about, and I really like the community spotlight that we do and bringing organizations to our meetings. We ask them what we can do for them, and I don't really see us following through quite yet with what they ask us to do for follow-up with them. So I'm hoping to create a process for follow-through or follow-up with the community spotlight, engaging them a little deeper, and how can we really work with them afterwards. I also really am wanting to do more outreach with youth, and I'm starting to work with Unite Oregon and by the support of Mole Ramos to get into the high schools to do some group meetings in their clubs and leadership groups. And I know Byron probably want to get involved with that. So hopefully a little more youth work, and I really do hope that we can engage the mental health community and policing. So those are the three things I've been thinking about tonight. Thank you.
I apologize for laughing. Dan Handelman made a comment online that was kind of funny to me. I don't need a response.
Okay. Great thoughts, Tia. Thank you. So I think if we're feeling good about this session, we can kind of leave this one here. Certainly always more to discuss, but I think we're probably ready to move into our next portion. And we can pause here for a break, use the bathroom, or get more food. You guys feeling, or you feeling you want to move into?
I can press on. I've been getting my.
Okay, we're just gonna move forward then, and just please leave as you need to. That seems to be the consensus. All righty, so next slide, I think. Kind of so I think we kind of covered this already. So taking what we had discussed in this last section, one thing, and we can go to the next slide. One thing that kind of struck me as I was thinking about the next couple of months is just how much is sort of on the table right now, both in terms of stuff going on in the city, but also just things that you all have brought up. So ongoing work, kind of, loose threads. Maybe we've had one meeting about that, this issue, or, there have been a lot of public comments about something, or, emails, discussing interest, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot going on. And this is just what I could remember, because as we've kind of been discussing, we're still working towards building this sort of collaborative system to sort of track all this stuff. So this is what is in my head about what has been expressed in recent meetings. So you can go to the next slide. And I'll let somebody else read through these.
I'll read it. Top to my left is Police Accountability Code Package up under PCCEP's codification, form on how brains injuries intersects with public safety and system and policing. Back to the top, expanding and funding Portland Street Response, continuing participation in contact survey project, PBB's policy on ramming vehicles, pit maneuver, consent search project, or I believe that's what that is there, policy, response time to emergency calls, language on citation given under Measure 110, which is Drug Addiction Treatment and Recovery Act.
Cool. Thank you, Pastor Reisner. So, I was thinking that it might be a useful exercise to start sort of thinking about moving into the next couple of months and sort of mapping out some priorities, getting into how you see this fitting into the committee, like what would go where, if any work groups are needed, if anyone wants to make or feels prepared to make commitments to working on certain projects. And we're not going to accomplish all of that here, but I think it just was occurring to me, there's so much out there that we could sort of start to kind of, you know, piece it together and chart a path forward. So with that said, we have a comment, Sarah.
Oh, I just wanted to say, this is Sarah Ames with the City Attorney's Office again. There's also a role, as I think many of you know. Sorry. There's also a role for a PCCEP member, at least, to participate or to observe and give feedback on the interview process for the monitor. The independent monitor to oversee the settlement agreement, and that would be also falling within this first quarter even of 2024. So that's just one more to keep in the back of your head. And then I'm going to do a shameless plug because we do hope to post the monitor request for applications this Friday and have it open for 5 weeks. So it's a good long chunk of time. But one of the pieces that's kind of unusual about this is we're also asking people who might have local expertise or some real depth of Portland, if they are interested in being on a monitor team, have some particular expertise, and want to like share their name with people from, you know, wherever. This is a national recruitment, right? So that they could maybe be included in one of the proposed monitor teams. We have that opportunity, and that opportunity, you'd have to get your name in to then be shared with potential applicants by the 10th of January. And so we're hoping that some of us with local contacts and connections can also kind of help spread the word about that opportunity.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for reminding us about another commitment that PCCEP does have, which is to participate in the interview process for the independent monitor.
On that, so how is that PCCEP member going to be selected? Are we going to have people kind of say, I want to do it, and then like we vote for them, or how is that process going to work?
That's a really good question. So it's PCCEP's decision, right? In the past, PCCEP has just sort of like done it on a volunteer basis, but then when more of the like first come first serve, but then when more of these opportunities started to come our way, I started to sort of say, okay, well, you've done one, you know, we'll go to the next person. But I think it would maybe be helpful for you to start thinking about a system where maybe you want to elect someone to do that, that kind of thing. That's a really good question.
Is that only on one or all?
That was more for this because it just seems such a big thing. You know, this independent monitor is very important. And so you know, we're all volunteers, but I would want somebody that is just really gonna be devoted and committed to it. And it seems like there needs to be more than just oh, I'll do it, I guess,
True.
you know?
I agree. And I think from our last person who did the training, which I think our group at that, thank you. I think our group at that time, we had, if you remember, a couple of people and that was interested in that looked for the time commitment in itself. We as a group felt comfortable with recommending at that time for the training dean interview was Celeste, because she had the capacity of time, but also we all at the same time felt that information and the time that we were needing to have person informed to make that decision for our group. But I always like to highlight that, in like what Leslie was saying, is that we have such a trusted group that whoever as representing where we go brings many gifts and many knowledgeable factors. So it's no one being excluded out of where it is.
Yeah.
But again, that does play a very important role of what you're saying, Leslie, because again, I think the comfort comes back into us as a group of what we have done successfully in our presence at the table, even in the our speaking at the judge in the circuit court.
Yeah, I think let's move on from this issue. I think the amount of trust amongst the group is extremely valuable and true. And you know, that said, I think again, as we continue to get more of these opportunities, having a system in place is a good idea. Just to sort of reemphasize that. Okay, so we're gonna move into kind of talking about these issues and we'll we can go back to that slide. We'll kind of just keep it with these for the time being, unless I've missed a really big area. And please feel free to let me know. And we'll take the monitor interview as a given. But we're gonna kind of maybe talk about priorities as we're moving into the next few months. So that's what we're kind of gonna move into now.
Yes, so as we look up here on the board at the suggestions we have here, we want to surface what is priority now. What are some areas you all want to dive into as we begin the year, and then we'll go forward from there. All right, love it, hands.
Well, I can say that Byron and I have already started working on the forum on how brain injuries intersect with public safety systems, et cetera. It was super exciting to have Brain Injury Connection Northwest as the community spotlight come and to our meeting. And from that, Byron and I reached out to them to start creating a forum called Brain Injuries and Policing and Public Safety. And we're holding a forum with conjunction with Brain Injury Connections Northwest on April 24th. And so we're working on the agenda and panelists and getting it all together.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to.
Evening, everyone. One of the things that I wanted to use as a factor for figuring out where things go in terms of priority is what has short timelines or short shelf life, or what is our most pressing need. And one of the things that stands out to me is the street response. And in a way, a lot of those elements up there are related to how the street response can roll out and how it can benefit the community at large. So I really want for us to look at how we can work with Portland Street Response to get it, well, to cement its presence. There's another thing that's not up there. Oh, don't do this to me, brain. You know what? I'm just gonna hand it off. It'll come back.
I'm gonna go over here to Kip and I'll jump back over here.
Just real simply, I want to second Portland Street response. There was also a city club meeting yesterday around 1:10, and Officer, I forget, he leads the Portland Police Union. His name escapes me right now.
Eric Schmaltz.
Yes, thank you. Was talking about the nexus of opportunities being very limited when police interact with somebody in crisis. And this entire conversation just screamed Portland Street responses needed to be fully funded 24/7. So I think this should be a top priority for our community.
I remembered what it was. Thanks for indulging. The other thing that's really important, and this comes down from both our own experiences and a mandate from the Department of Justice, is to improve and strengthen our relationship with PPB, Police Bureau. And I know that there are a lot of issues we're going to have to talk about and get straight so that we can have a meaningful relationship that we need, but that should be on there. And that is an expectation that has been emphatically articulated by Judge Simon. So we have to figure out how we can do that. And yeah, that's it.
That's a great comment, Celeste. And I think I just want to clarify. So we're talking about, and really important background sort of framing. We're talking about really specific sort of policy points that PCCEP might translate into recommendations or committee work with these points. But that point is well taken.
Okay. Well, I was thinking that.
Okay, yeah, I was just wanted to, I think, yeah, PSR from the top three for me. The reason why I say top three, I want to stop there for a second. So I think something I think we should all be mindful of is as we kind of prioritize this list and commit to sort of work, like, I think also there's been some benefit of our flexibility for issues that come up.
How about what?
Our flexibility for the issues that come up that come from the community and say, hey, we need attention to this. So I just, being mindful of that. And as we do think of a work plan, how, as somebody's well said this, and we all know this, we're volunteers. We all have a couple full-time jobs outside of this. So just, that mindfulness of what prioritize and also our capacity, and then also like being available for things that come up throughout the year. But I think PSR for sure, because that relates to that alternative policing piece of our statute, like what we're supposed to be doing here, and uplifting that and practicing that. And then I think sort of to what Celeste was saying, I think Police Accountability Commission code package should be really up there as well when we're thinking about how we are supporting and being partners out in the community for police policies. And, obviously this is a big one right now. And it's something that, we just talked about in our last meeting. So I think that's just something that we need to, I think we should be working on a work plan on how we support that effort, support the voter mandated process by really making sure our community is engaged in this conversation as it moves forward. And then I think PCCEP codification is also the third one for me, because as we look forward to the change in the charter and our new government setup, like, it's gonna be a little madness, I think. And it's gonna be a lot of learning curve, and it's all good stuff, but it's gonna be a big change. And I think if we can say PCCEP matters here because of this, then the next mayor and the next council can't not, they need to still be listening to us and still know that we're still an arm here in the city for community input. That's what I want to say.
Yes, I agree with you. That was going to be my my thought with the new change. But we have been reassured. I'd always want to follow up with what we have heard, that PCEP is very much so a very part of wanting to be engaged at all time and alive in the community and the voices from the community and that structures. But I do believe if that would be something, it would be my top, I think, strong top. And then I echo behind my co-pilot there. And then I would look at the areas of what everyone's been saying about the importance of what it is with the Portland street response in that order there.
So I think a few things, the PAC stuff, my understanding is there's a really short time frame on that. So, well, I'm not sure it's the most impactful, and I worry that it's, the gutting of the code package is a done deal. If we want to act on it, I think there's a short window. So that's worth calling out. I also want to echo that PSR should be a top priority for us. It's not technically in the police bureau, but it is replacing a lot of police work. And I think in other cities, it's sort of the equivalent programs are a part of the police. So again, I think we should be focusing on that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, sort of connecting to Celeste's point, several of these items actually give us an opportunity to practice working with police. Specifically, I think consent search policy, citations given under Measure 110, and the PIP maneuvers would all benefit from active engagement with police and getting officers' perspective, sergeants' perspectives on how these things would work, what the policy trade-offs are. And so taking on some of those issues would sort of be a double whammy of taking on the issue, but also helping us build that relationship. And I also want to acknowledge, I think in the past we've asked for PBB officers to participate in our meetings or at least show up. And I want to acknowledge that there is an officer in the room with us here tonight. And thank you for being here. Who's next?
Who else? Leslie.
Yeah, I think I got this one. So I think for me, the couple of high priorities are the PSR for sure. And then just because of the time that they will take, the form of brain injury, because it's gonna take a lot of planning to do it successfully. So I think that is a big, if we do wanna do it and we wanna do it right, we gotta get on it, especially for when we said we were gonna do it, which is the first couple months of the year. And then I agree with like some of the other things that we can work on that would be almost, I don't want to say easy because that's not the right word. They all take engagement, but they would be recommendations that we can put out. Would be the consent search policy and the language on citations given under Measure 110. Sorry, like my glasses are kind of, these are my old ones. But yeah, so I think those types of things that we can like engage the community quickly, get recommendation out, get information out to the community. Those are priorities we should keep in mind.
Other thoughts? Anyone in the corner over here?
Any of our newer colleagues, speak up. There's nothing wrong. There's no wrong answer.
But I think it pretty much said that we all prioritize everything at this point. But and I can see in my brain how they're falling into different sections. Some are quick and turnkey, like you were just saying, and others are going to have to rely on watching what happens in the government as the changes happen. But I think codification, in my mind, we can't really get any traction without codification. And then the street response, just because it's going to get worse before it gets better if we don't have quick action on that.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think there's kind of two ways to look at everything, is like what could be done a little quicker and with less capacity, but also like which of these are necessary in order to like prevent as much potential harm as possible. And so like that really brings up Portland Street response in terms of like reduction of harm and prevention. But then like changing the language on the citation to just add the phone number needed to call is like a very easy fix that can happen. But yeah, I feel like we're all very much on similar pages, so that's good.
Good stuff. Yeah, so I think some things are definitely emerging here and definitely kind of coming into view as sort of the longer term projects that would require more of that PCCEP community engagement time, and then other things maybe more subcommittee work, you know, drafting something quickly, that kind of thing. Ashley, you have something?
I was just wondering, would it be worth doing this, but maybe categorizing it into that, like,
Quarterly thing.
what quarterly, or I was thinking maybe this like drop down menu of like what's quick and what's long-term. And then also, I really like that, like what of these would help us bring the most value to the community in terms of decreasing harm by policing? Like, that's what I heard, I think I heard you say. So I really like that. Like, I don't know, just like, maybe that could help us with prioritizing, but I don't know.
And also what work could go where in the committee, like, you know, to sort of start giving some shape to it, maybe.
That sounds really.
So Afrida, can you help us?
Yes. So PSR and those related to PSR seem to be the most agreed upon movement forward. And so my mind goes into a matrix. And so kind of along these lines of like, you know, urgency versus length of time, kind of. I see folks, okay, folks are in the same ballpark here for me. So it feels as if, well, what are you wanting right now? I can help establish how to get there that way.
You know, looking at what you were saying earlier, you're looking at what you were saying earlier in the category. I think self-work is, if I heard correctly, the immediate actions that are happening that's affecting right now. I think we look at the response, Portland response, and then we have some of the PAC in that area. And then, of course, in long, the club, the PC club, because everything, and then I see the importance of what is long work, and that's the brain capacity. That's just my opinion.
Right. And so with the brain injury piece.
So how about, maybe a place to start here, is where, again, there's so many ways to sort of get into all this. I think again, some themes emerging. What if we started by kind of assessing the group's feelings about the levels of external urgency about that impact the things on this board?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Because there can be like group priorities, but then of course those are impacted by like things that you all can't control, as we well know, because you all have been working within this political and city process for a while now.
I
So
think that's perfect.
let's start there.
I think that's perfect. And if I'm following Dory, is it that we're hopefully pulling out a ideal of a work group that will pick up and start in the categories of where that we moving into? That's step 2. So 1 will be the first identifier. Is that what you're looking at in that suggestion?
I think maybe what we're trying to do is, as a group, come to some consensus about what the priorities are. And as we all know, a part of that negotiation is sort of the external timelines or sense of urgency that you may perceive. That is something I'm hearing that's coming up relative to these issues.
So could we go down the list and maybe say Police Accountability Commission? Question 1, how urgent is it? Question 2, how big of a priority wise, and assign it, and then just kind of go down the list that way so that we can.
That's good. That's good.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. Just yeah, just so that we have, because I think there's 2 things that we're evaluating, right? Or is there just one? Urgency? Okay, yeah, I mean. Urgency and ease. I
Yeah,
think those
absolutely.
were the 2 things that I heard.
See ease or capacity and like overall benefit to like the value of, sorry, I know that's like a lot, but I know it's a lot, but I think we should,
Go ahead. Yes.
May I suggest you kind of look at how some things mesh, because urgency and value to the community are they're like the same thing in a sense. You know what I'm saying?
so I guess
It's
it-
urgent because the community needs it.
I do think. Sure.
I just wanted to clarify that when I was talking a while ago, Byron and I have already started working on the forum, on the brain injury forum. And we've had our meeting, but you made me think that we've created the agenda, we're working on panelists, but you made me think that coming to PCCEP for more suggestions, because Byron and I took it on as one of our action plans.
Mm.
So we've come a long way with it so far.
Yeah, we're just trying to
so
support you. How
I have another question about codification. When I came on in 2021, I was given a codification sheet. So I have a codification printout. I think Taji created it.
I think it was Taji
And-
and Maria, maybe.
Was it not adopted? And where,
No, it was not at that time. No. I think, as you all know, a lot happened.
But there's something missing in my mind with that. We have a template.
We
The-
have something. Don't call it a template
I'm
yet.
just looking at,
I would
it's
say-
new language out there.
Yeah, let's focus
put
on the
that parking
details.
lot, 'cause it's a lot, that's a loaded issue right there. We
I'll
didn't
park
have
it.
as much community input as it should have.
Okay. I'll
I
do it.
think the codification plan or, language should be grounded in, this current
We'll all talk
PCCEP
at the
and-
end, yeah.
and also, of course, everything that's been learned and reflection from, but sounds like Kip has something in the back.
You have a template.
So one thought I have on how to work through all this and focus and prioritize is based on what's work has already been done, what is going to require additional community involvement and how much, and then put it into, let's say, think in corporate terms on a quarterly basis. What do we want to schedule out for the next 3 months coming up? And then look at, out of the things that are already in flight, still need more input, urgency, we can prioritize in the time we have in those 3 months on what to focus on.
I feel like I maybe confused everyone and overcomplicated things. All I wanted to convey was you could do a lot of this work anytime. You could do some of this work next October. And, you know, it you know, could have the same impact. Some of these things, if you waited till next October, they wouldn't be on the table anymore, right? So if your goal is to be able to touch all of these things, there is some calculation that goes into the urgency, and that is a reasonable step one. I think creating a matrix of all the variables is way too complicated.
Do two issues sound like a reasonable number to tackle?
I would say I think you can definitely take on more than that, but I think we're just trying to start filling in the gaps. So identifying what pieces maybe have that urgency to you, and then fill in the other things, which really what we're doing is giving shape to the way PCCEP has been operating. Nathan described PCCEP being good at being reactive to emerging issues. And I think what we're trying to do now is fill in more of that space with more of these static policy issues that is ripe for your review.
Community Engagement Subcommittee did host a town hall for PSR. And at the end, we talked about next steps, and we were going to see how things went, because it sounded like there was a lot of positives around it. And even Renee Gonzalez said he wasn't going to let it go, but so we didn't really move forward. But now it looks like there is issues, so maybe we should have town hall number 2. Something like that. So now there's a struggle again.
And that's like thinking about what PCCEP's influence can be in that discussion, because there's a lot of partners and we're just one tiny one. And I think that provided a place for accountability for the city to say, okay, come talk. And they tried to wiggle out of it. If anybody remembers, like, but like making them come and talk to it and answer questions, I think is what we have. We have the resources to do that. And that's exactly what we need to be doing, is getting community input, letting them have an opportunity to be in a forum with decision makers. And so I really like that idea. And I think that could be an easy one to promote and put on the calendar early on. And Tia, were you done with your thoughts? I wanted to put my thoughts on the PAC code package. So that's, as Nathan said, that's like a kind of a quick turnaround. And as much as I try to be an engaged community member, I am still sort of confused about, I don't know, we took that meeting, but I think I'm still like, on December 15th, is there going to be a decision? And then nothing can be done after that. I think that's where I'm like, what can we do? And I always look to Dory, because he's always our guiding light of like, how do we navigate this city? And how do we, make sure that we're being heard, and that, PCCEP is like, and it was, and I think I want to say like that was, and we did, and we had that space and we had that forum. But if this code package is on our priority list, like, what does that mean? What are we doing there? I guess is what I wanted to ask.
How can we impact that?
How can we impact that? And how would that be a priority for us?
I don't have the answers to the bigger questions you're asking, but what I do know is that is Sarah not in the room anymore? Okay. On December 15th, good, she's not in the room. Just kidding. On December 15th, the city's public comment window closes. And then the city has to turn it over, the code, to DOJ at what time?
So the city council on December 8th. No, November, I'm sorry, on November 15th, did give the city attorney's office authority to forward the package that they passed that day, which included both the code package to enact the community board on police accountability and the associated settlement agreement amendments to the accountability section of the settlement agreement. They gave authority to send those to DOJ and to also fulfill our bargaining obligations that might exist with the police unions. And then further directed the city attorney's office to meet again in person with the PAC because we hadn't had the opportunity to really have that public conversation. And that did happen. And they held the meeting open until, the public comment period opened until December 15th. So right now, in this interim period, it's under review by DOJ. They may have some suggestions for revisions. We heard some clear suggestions for revisions from the PAC members and other members of the public who came to a meeting in this same room on December 4th. And we're also going to probably hear some feedback from the unions about the code package. And so from three very different sources, we'll be bringing some ideas together and putting and getting something to the court.
So is it an accurate summary that the package is currently under review by DOJ, and at some undetermined time, DOJ will come back to the city, and also the union will be a part of that, and then like a final negotiation will have to happen, or come to a final agreement between all of those parties.
Yes, and as long as it's substantially similar, not that much different from what the council has already passed, it does not need to go back to council before being sent to the court for approval of the amendments to the settlement agreement. So it's kind of one of these kind of like, in short, the very public process, which has gone on for 2 years since the PAC started meeting, is kind of the window for public comment is brought to a close. But obviously, our council members are the ultimate decision makers, and they listen outside of the prescribed set periods. But I think it's closing up. Of course, the next piece is once it does get through and all that, then there's appointments to the group, which are going to be critical. And so, there could be some thoughts that members of PCCEP have about how that should go. I don't know. So, there are next phases of the rollout of the implementation, because that's going to be a whole other project.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. That was really helpful. So like in terms of what's going on at DOJ, do you think that PCCEP at this time could make a recommendation? Like, could we still be adding some like extra input to the DOJ's decision? Because I think I have just like a little, it feels concerning, and I know there's like a process and it's been going on for a couple of years, but here we have a council who's going to make a decision and then not be in office next year, and that implication of how the process is the code package is implemented. I guess, is that being considered? And I'm thinking a little bit top of my head, but I was just wondering, like, I'm just trying to figure out how can PCCEP still bring in some community input into this process to make sure that we're doing the due diligence that the package is passed the way the voters wanted it to be. If that makes sense.
I think that's the conversation that council was trying to have leading up to their vote. And they thought that it hadn't been quite, they wanted to leave the window open for a little bit longer to take more comments.
That's the period. Okay. Well, yeah, I think the DOJ question, is there still space to like talk to DOJ about our recommendation to accept the package?
That's not really their role. Their role is to let the city, I mean, basically, the city is in charge of the local process, and then we make a proposal to them, and they evaluate it against the principles and the goals of the settlement agreement. And our legal obligation to create a system of accountability that is timely, fair, just, and delivers true accountability and consistent discipline for any violations of policy. So, those are kind of, off the top of my head, the benchmarks that they'll be looking at the proposal against. They don't want to get involved in the local community politics, and I mean, that's kind of, that is why we have elected officials. So I think that's their position.
No, I understand that. I was just trying to think about the relationship PCCEP has with DOJ and, the input that and the influence we have there. And so still being part of, understanding that there was this whole process, but I guess, in relation to like our conversation here at PCCEP, just trying to figure out how does this stay a priority for us then? Like how do we move anything? Or how do we make this something we're going to keep? I mean, I don't know. I guess it's maybe like hosting something of the DOJ's decision. I mean, can we get ahead of that maybe? Sorry. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. Pastor Wisner.
I was just thinking, there has been opportunities of more dialogue from the PAC itself, their team, and informing how that their directions and what they see might be the avenue of having that conversation to answer those questions that where a lot are not clear. And again, I think that's what we do well, how we do what we do well. We don't have to be the experts, but we can have dialogue where more clarity is open, and then also have the city to be there to talk with that. And I think that's been open and suggested before, so it would be a good point.
Yeah, that's a really good point as far as what PCCEP does well. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So I think that certainly a level of urgency assigned to that, but certainly also lots of questions around the process there for sure. So we can look into that moving forward, but I think we've had that discussion about the urgency on that issue for sure, and the Portland Street response. That is clear as well. And people are feeling the urgency around codification too. Okay. Anything else up here that feels like you want to put it in permanent marker somewhere in the first quarter? I see Celeste and Kip.
I think the only thing I'd add would be the language on the citations for Measure 110. There is a lot of conversation coming up on changes, and one of the big parts of it is compliance, and having the citation language change might help with that. So I think that should be urgent.
Ms. Celeste, coming to you.
Thank you. I've been trying to do this pretty much since before Dory came on. It's not a burning priority, but it's really important that we have some kind of education or public discussion about consent searches. So, I would put it in the second ring of priority, because it has been a pressing issue lately. Well, no, not lately. Not lately, but it's been a pressing issue. So that's the only thing. But I also know that we can work on some of these things concurrently. Because like I said, in my weird ADD mind, everything has a connection. So I can figure out, whether you use a Venn diagram or whatever, the parts of connection with a couple of other things we want to work on. But if we're going to work on the street response, number one of the things I want to do is strategize about how we're going to have a conversation with the commissioner in charge of the process, given the campaign for office and various other, y'all know, details surrounding, swirling around that dynamic. That's as diplomatic as I can be. Did I see your hand, Nathan?
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you though.
Didn't you have something that you wanted to bring before with the, as a truth and reconciliation, something you had to talk about that we wanted to do and you thought it was pressing in the last meeting? I can't recall what it was.
You know, I brought it up at our meeting, was it Friday, with the mayor and the chief? And that was just trying to make sure there was a police liaison and some regularly scheduled meetings with entities like Unity and Folk Time, whatever. And I did bring that up to the mayor and to the chief, and they had been working on something similar to that already. Thought it was a great idea and are going to be moving forward on bringing that together and having like a team meeting. So you know, that's good. But that's what it was, but that's different. I don't want to get off into a tangent.
Well, that answers Ashley's question earlier that I didn't talk about. When She said, what else was there? What else was there discussed in the, and I'm glad that that was able to be brought because that was an important conversation.
I remembered it and I put it on my list and we talked about it.
Okay, so if feels like there are, oh, go ahead, Nathan. Yeah.
So I just have a thought on Portland Street response. I know we talked about a town hall, which I think is a great idea. I wonder if we should be thinking a little more broadly. Make recommendations to the mayor. The mayor is the person who appoints commissioners. If there's a particular commissioner causing problems for PSR, the mayor can fix that with a stroke of the pen.
It depends on what the other dynamics with the other commissioners are. So I like where you're going with that, but I just want to make sure we dig at least a little bit deeper to make sure that's the fix.
Yes, but I'm just saying we should be thinking broadly about what our options are. We can make recommendations.
I agree.
We can recommend a commissioner change. We can recommend, and this would be a bigger lift to implement, but we can make a recommendation that PSR is moved out of the fire bureau. That made sense. I mean, it never really made sense, but it was a historical just fact of how it came about and the commissioner who sponsored it. We can make these recommendations, whether or not we want to, or whether it makes sense. It might be, you know, making bad policy recommendations. That's something to talk about, but I just want to make sure we're not just saying, giving up on the idea of more detailed recommendations before we talked about it.
That kind of brings into another thinking in my thought, especially with the structure of the new change, with the change that are coming, because a lot that's dealing with that decision, we think about where does the Community Safety Division and the importance work and how it's outlined. And I think we sit in that category. But again, I think having that discussion and having that accountability to the commissioners, along with that response of having them to address it to us, is very important, because we don't know what the next change is looking like. Is there already some diagrams out or something? I don't know, but it would be a good topic, I think, to address, along with how accountability is for that commissioner or those commissioners. Very good point.
Well, I like what we're doing this because we're being very strategic.
Yeah.
Kip, did you have something?
No, I love Nathan's idea. I have nothing more to add.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna hold myself to the process I described, which is kind of trying to identify maybe the big fixtures that you all are interested in, And then I think the goal would be to sort of fill in the gaps with the smaller stuff. Especially the sort of easier, shorter term stuff. I think we can do that more as we go. And leaving space for obligations that come up. Flexibility for other urgent things that may arise, et cetera. Looks like somebody on the Zoom is unmuted. There we go. So if we were to kind of assign these issue areas to parts of the committee, the three big ones that you said were the most urgent, what would we be thinking? And would any work groups be required?
I'm not saying we have the sole purview over it, but I think it's really important that the co-chairs take on a level of responsibility regarding Portland Street response. What, I was gonna say, but having a group, but I just see a layered report, a layered approach, like we have a responsibility for making sure this stays prominent with leadership, that's all. I mean, yeah, a group, but I just want to say that's whoever it is.
I think specifically my question is like what subcommittee, if you feel like a certain subcommittee should take up those issue areas, and if additionally a work group would be required, et cetera, or if things should firmly be in the full committee.
Well, I wanted to ask though, as the second part of my statement was, does Portland Street response belong to settlement and policy? I don't know. That's kind of where I was going with that.
I think, yes. I think so. I would look, I don't mean to speak out of line, but in the areas of what the way that is framing from how funding is being done are the questions that are out there. The questions that are out there. It, in my mind, and everybody please help if I'm out too far, but it does look like it's determined upon policy is how it's going to be run and operate.
I'm seeing some reactions. Any other ideas about that? I think we also want to consider workload of thinking about them as a unit of three that we're discussing at the moment. What is optimal in terms of the division as well?
So if it doesn't fall into settlement policy or community engagement, or if either of those are too overloaded, take it on.
A united system.
Or I think there can always be like, if something is in settlement and policy, but there can also be a work group that's like drafting something or like doing specific work, like,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That was kind of be my question, like the topic of expansion and funding of Portland Street response is very broad. Like what are we looking, at the end of the day, we make a recommendation, right? But like, what are we doing potentially? Like, are we making a recommendation? Are we learning more about it? Are we educating the community? Like, what are the different things that we
Can or should do
under that?
I'm hoping recommendation.
Well,
I mean,
That's my hope.
yeah, I think ultimately, it's almost like an interesting thing. It's like our starting point is any of these, and our endpoint for, I think, all of these really is a recommendation.
Right.
I guess when I'm looking for clarity around all these topics is like what happens in between, because some of these are gonna need multiple things, and other of these are just like, oh, well, maybe a group can get together and draft something for that recommendation. So I guess I'm looking for like that middle piece of what we're looking to do for these.
what's the actual action?
Yes.
So-
Is that what the working group defines?
Like that go back to yourself. Help us with your idea.
Does anyone have a vision around what would be an ideal path for any of these areas?
Yeah, just about PSR, they released like a pretty extensive letter. So I think they're already like kind of sharing their asks with the community. And so it's more about like uplifting that and talking to them about how we can support that. Because if Gonzalez hasn't been showing up to their meetings or answering their questions, how can we supplement that and so that they can have that 24/7
That's good.
funding. So it's like, I think it's really highlighting what they need from us in terms of that.
Regarding PSR and action steps we could take, I mean, I'm wondering if we can start the process of trying to schedule that town hall. That feels like an easy piece because well, easy in terms of getting on Renee Gonzalez's calendar, but finding that, and maybe that's a January, February time frame. Just thinking of
Right.
practicalities here. And then from there, and I think you're right, like reviewing what other community groups are doing and asking for, and then, maybe trying to come up with a panel and we do, because I don't think we invited Friends of PSR last time. I think we invited them to the meeting, but I don't think they were on the panel, right? So maybe that's like getting that perspective because they have some specific asks, getting Renee back here, getting so-and-so back here so that we do that follow-up. And then maybe from that, we can gather some of that input to then inform a recommendation. Because I think we've gotten 2 touch points of community that we could maybe at that point, looking at our notes, then, do our process of drafting a recommendation, bringing it up and going through that rhythm. And then I was thinking I think PSR actions, at least the town hall would fall under community engagement because that's the piece of like, getting the community input. But I'm wondering if the piece of codification is under settlement policy, or it's like a work group maybe? Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, that one's so obviously full committee oriented. I would suggest a work group, and then reviewing the language. And also the city attorneys, Sarah Ames has some standard codification language that she has already worked on that we can kind of use as a foundation. And then I think what this project really will be is sort of a space for you to evaluate the additional things that you may want to kind of negotiate in getting into code for PCCEP. So that's sort of, I think, the work to be done. The sort of legal aspects of, the code language and like also some of the bones of translating some of the PCCEP plan elements over to code has already been done for us.
So Dory, going to Ashley's point on the police response and engagement, would that answer one of your initial questions about priority as urgency next step? And we start in this form, going toward that in this new first year coming?
I think Ashley had really good thoughts about where some of this work could live and a path forward, but that's for you all to kind of rally around, right?
So I'm in thought with polling the question to the group, if that's what I see, and I'm feeling that. Co-chair?
I think so. If we're working on Portland street response, maybe as a community engagement subcommittee thing, or Nathan?
So we're treating PSR like one big item. It could be multiple smaller items. So the town hall is one part, engaging the PSR, the Friends of PSR group is one part. Potentially drafting specific recommendations. I know one thing I care about a lot is, or not care, just I see as an issue is clarity of communication about PSR is something that I think could be improved. There have been so many times, I'll keep this short, there have been so many times where I hear one thing from the commissioner's office, one thing in public, and then it's like, what? It's not surprising the community's confused. And then the other part could be drafting specific recommendations about, does PSR belong in the fire bureau? How do we want to govern it? Do we want to expand it? Do we want to recommend that it goes 24/7, things like that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think that sounds more similar to the way PCCEP has sort of been operating the last year, where the group is pretty comfortable with kind of just dividing the work between subcommittees and being pretty flexible in that way. And that sounds,
So I guess the part I forgot to say is something I thought worked really well last year was the bylaws. which was a work group. It was just like a Word document and then Zoom meetings that worked for the members. I think for the PSR, but I also think for the other things like the brain injury forum. If there's 2 or 3 PCEP members that want to just take that on, that might be more efficient than making it a subcommittee issue.
But we already have 2 members that's doing the brain injury.
Good points, good points.
Yeah, I just want to bring just a little attention to time and see where we want to land with this piece here before we move into public comment. A lot of really great work has gone on. And so just, are there any final thoughts that we want to make sure that we land with before we move forward?
For the co-chairs of PCEP. I guess it's directed to you because I think something as a member, I'm always sort of blocked with is like, we come out of these spaces with really good ideas. We have really great facilitators and really great staff who sort of like get it to going. But I feel like there's a lack of like a little bit of initiative. And I'm looking at myself on that. Like the month of November, I was gone. Like you guys couldn't find me. I was surviving for sure. And I know that happens to some of us all the time. So but how are we like keeping each other accountable to mapping this out and continuing it so that we can, be accountable to the community that we're here for. And I guess I'm asking maybe the co-chairs for a little bit of leadership there to spend some time. I don't know. Sometimes I wish, and maybe this is something I could just do, some sort of summary of what happened and what we wanted to do with next steps so that as we're prepping, because I think this is what me and Tia are always thinking about for community engagement subcommittee. We want to bring what is being talked about and bring it to a space where we are connecting it to community. But sometimes we're like, what's our agenda? And I would really love it if there was just a little bit more initiative from co-chairs to sort of like map out where they think this could land so that the co-chairs of the subcommittees could then plan ahead and work. And I'm sorry, maybe not to put it on you, maybe it's all on us, but just like I feel like maybe it's a role.
That's a good question. You mean I'm not loud enough?
All right, all right.
Anyway, my point was, I want the committee members to feel a little bit more secure in being able to meet their needs as well as the committee needs. And we have kind of mapped it out, but I'm not a heavy-handed person, and we had certain steps that need to be in place first. And you actually got a lot, like I said, at the last community engagement meeting, you got a lot of that stuff done. And we needed to have that done before we could do a lot of the outreach we wanted. Now we're also working on the content that we're going to reach out with. But I think this is a good point to say, what kind of structure do you want to be accountable? Because one of the things I had mentioned previously is we used to give summaries of our committee activity at the steering committee meetings. And sometimes we would submit a short blurb, written blurb. As the meetings progressed, it became verbal. So if you give us ideal members individually and then committee chairs, subcommittee chairs, what is a good system? Because I want you to feel like you have some freedom to work in the subcommittees you're in to feed your soul. I mean, I don't want to be authoritarian. This is a collaboration. But at the same point, I hear what you're saying. It's like we could use a little bit more idea of how we work together. That was something that I had talked to Dory about back in, I think, late September, early October. Then I left, I had surgery, she got sick, there it was, so we fell apart. But let's just pick that up again. Be thinking of what way you want us to communicate, what system of accountability will work with this committee, and then we do it, and I think that works best because it's organic. It's not me saying we're gonna do it this way. and I have the capacity to do that, but I don't find it helpful,
And I will respond into the question and thought. is that I'm always mindful that I talk from 1990 and I realize that I've got a lot of language that I see that I would expect everybody else to kind of pick real quick. But again, what I do know is that where we have come from is like Celeste is saying, is giving the feel of coming in comfortable and guiding it through. Because if it's hitting like it is directed in one person's point of view, then you kind of have what I'm hoping that we are very good at right now is strong accountability to each other. And the trust gauge of where we are, it comes from out of what we hear from you as where we go back and then come back again. And just like what we have done before, we have always asked the question to where that we see as a team and shot spotters. If you remember how we did with shot spotters. And with shot spotters, there was a lot of conversation around where everybody stood, but we collectively came together. In this last one as well, we came together at that. So again, I hope that what we are able to do going, what I think this meeting is setting us for the next one, is to set it into templates, is set it into where now we have had the honeymoon period, we can move into the areas of what it is. And I don't use, I'm trying to say it nicely, is to say, to answer your question, actually, I'm ready to do just what you asked, really. And I'm hoping that you have trusted the areas of what we're doing and trying to make everybody there.
To what you were saying, Ashley, I think that's a really great point. I think before we get into public comment, it might be good to allocate like 5 minutes to recapping action items at the end of meetings. And then at that point saying who wants to take this on. And maybe that's where the co-chairs step in to say, well, not necessarily step in, but who wants to take this on? Anybody in the committee can take it on, but the co-chairs will not necessarily be responsible, but can follow that process and like check it or something like that. You know what I mean?
That's very good. Yes. Let's just do that.
Yeah, and I like it because it's organic, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Survey too for us members, but maybe like a post, like a survey. But yeah, maybe let's just start there. Let's just start like simple, but maybe also another piece could be a survey that we send, and
Yeah.
that's where we all put our, like, what did we take away? That way as co-chairs, you know, we have that sort of filtered information that's real time and
Yeah.
stuff.
It could
And
be
don't
to the
forget,
point
we
that
have
like,
office hours too.
yeah.
With Dory.
Mhm.
Now, if you want, we can do another separate set, you
Yeah.
know, so that we can check in with each other.
Yeah. To that point, do we have any action items?
I think the action items, to be honest, are gonna be for me to sort through everything discussed and compile, like kind of identify the action items and sort of fill in maybe a perspective calendar for you all. That's the homework I'm gonna give myself. And then, you know, we can sort of discuss and flesh that out further. I think anything beyond that at this time would be a little overwhelming because we've been so big picture with this, which is really great. I think really great progress made in this meeting. And final
have-
comment, Leslie?
Yeah, I have just one more thing on that, your action item. I think another action item that you can capture is something I said at the beginning of the meeting, which was the tracker that I mean to have prepared for the next meeting.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that would help me as knowing that it's all an action item is knowing when, because it needs to be published so that the community can see it before I bring it, or not for that one.
Not necessarily for
Okay.
something like that, like but ideally, yes. I mean, yes, that's the best practice.
Yeah, so then at that point, I think that would be something, that could be something where you follow up with me as our project manager and be like, hey, are you gonna have this ready by the time we send out the agenda? Because it needs to be ready by that point. So just as an example of how we.
For
could
sure,
move forward.
yeah, that's great feedback. Cool. So let's open it up to open public comment now. So anyone here with us, we'll just hand you the mic. And feel free to just raise your hand. And this is a time to comment on anything expressed in the course of this meeting or anything else that is relevant to PCCEP's work.
Comment online.
Oh, so they can't hear us. They can only,
They can hear us.
oh,
But we can't hear them.
Are
oh,
we able to
are they,
answer the
can we
type?
see them in the chat? That is a lot of comments though.
Of a comment.
It's a matter of having fewer comments instead of more. I'm not sure that Sarah was paying attention when the question about how does Portland Street response fit in with the settlement agreement? And since she's not nodding, I'm gonna say my understanding, tiny from being on the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Council, is it fits in to, and I can't quote you the paragraph, where it talks about the Bureau of Emergency Communications, which is 911, sending calls to the right people. So as far as a diversion away from police when there isn't violence and it meets other criteria, then Portland Street response can be called. In your thing of 9 post-its, I think it was 9 up there, one of them was decrease emergency response time. And that actually, in my mind, fits in with the PSR one, because the more calls you have PSR taking, the more officers you have available to go to calls. And if it was a comment about wait times on 911, I got nothing to say.
Any other open public comment this evening? And this can also be from PCCEP members if there are no members of the public.
I just want to know, could you read some of the questions that you have on the chat?
Yeah, but there's nothing, we can do that, but there's nothing, well,
There was a response from.
there's nothing that has been directed to me as a comment to read, which is what I had instructed.
Keela Bricklin said, response times are related to recruitment needs. I think if PCCEP were to work on response times, they should also look into how expand PPB's recruitment. It's a little bit different than what you were saying. Yeah, so it's not really a question or it's just comment. I think I like Barb's connection better. That makes way more sense. But I mean, that's kind of where my brain went.
And that's why we.
Well,
and that's why
we don't comment on the comments.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna read the comment Dan just put in the chat.
I just read.
I don't think we have much more in the chat. Okay. Well, if that's all we've got, we're happy to end 2 minutes early.
Look at us.
What's up?
There we go. Do you want to remind folks of the meetings, upcoming meetings?
Absolutely. Actually, Emily, can you go back one slide? One more. So PCCEP and members of the public here. If everyone eyes on the screen. So here is an overview of our January PCEP meetings. As you know, this is our last meeting of the year. Congratulations, everybody, for making it through. So we're gonna start the month off on January 10th and observe our usual meeting rotation. And important to note that on the full committee meeting on January 24th, which will be another hybrid meeting, we will be holding elections for PCEP leadership. All of the seats are up for re-election, so that's full committee chairs, subcommittee co-chairs for both subcommittees. And yeah, I will be in touch with or available to all of you if you have more questions about that process. But that's a really big thing to flag, and I will be in touch with the details of what we've sketched out here, and we will formulate plans for these meetings. Yeah, I think with that, it is just about 8:30, and we can adjourn this meeting. Thanks so much, everybody, for your contributions tonight. Thanks for everybody who followed along online, and we will see you in the new year.
Recording stopped.